Welcome, everybody, to Tackling Stigma. I am Tami Romano, the manager of the Professional Athletes program here at APN. And I have to the right of me my co-host, Anthony Fasano.
Thank you. Yeah, Anthony Fasano, President, APN Athletics. Being a former football player, kind of know some of the things these guys are going through and can relate and kind of speak the same language. And that's my role here at APN.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then on my left, I have Chris Borland. Want to share a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Played just 1 year in the NFL and have spent a few years doing advocacy. Got introduced to APN earlier this year. And currently today I'm here on a week-long visit to meet more people, to learn more about the program. Good.
What have you learned so far?
A lot. I think every path through the NFL and in transition is different, but there's so many commonalities. And to be here this week with, a dozen guys going through the program, you realize just how much we all have in common. No matter where you played or how your career ended up, it's such a huge, disequilibrium. You go from such a regimented lifestyle to what now? Who am I? How do I navigate the real world? And it's great to see therapists like yourself, sharing the type of tools and approaches that can help with that transition.
Yeah, good. So you've enjoyed it?
I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm just trying to digest it all. It's a lot.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to kind of look at today. When we tackling stigma. Stigma of mental health, and we all have different journeys and how we arrive and where we're at. And so I just, want to be able to take some time with both of you and, take a look at the stigma of mental health, how it may have, kind of affected you or have kept us silent, or, what's really behind when we look at stigma in, from your past and where we're at today.
Yeah, it's a journey for me, and I think I'm just scratching the surface. Like Chris, I've learned a lot. I learned a lot from being in the mental health industry, in the space, for a number of years now, and then also weeks like this, really hearing the guys and their journeys, and like Chris said, the commonalities between them, and then relating it back to your life and kind of looking at it in your own perspective in your own life. And while we don't have the same experiences, we can learn from each other's. And I think there's a lot of growth that happens with the fellowship with like-minded people that have experienced similar stuff. And I think it's super beneficial, and in the conversation between men and athletes need to happen more often.
Good.
So earlier this morning, I read your Wikipedia page, and I imagine we have a few things in common. So
I need to read that.
But when we think about stigma in football with mental health, I think masculinity is linked to it. For me, religion. I grew up Roman Catholic too. So the idea of mental health being openly talked about when I was growing up was just totally foreign. I think as a Catholic and as a football player, and my family was pretty traditional. My dad was a protector provider type.
Yeah.
That toughness is important. Taking care of people is important in life and in football. And so the idea of being vulnerable is just seen as weak. I can't show that I'm injured or concerned, or even show my opponent I'm tired. And those things help you become a great player in any sport, particularly football. I think where the challenge is once you're done, that holding so tightly to those ideas, thinking I can tough my way through things. The world and your mental health journey don't work like that. And I think guys get themselves in trouble, trying to be the strong, stoic, quiet guy. And, learning here that it's okay to explore vulnerability, connect with others, and share whatever struggles you've had.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you had talked about masculinity and religion. I mean, I could go a lot of different places there, right? But I'm curious. You said you played 1 year?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And so when we look at, like you said, this vulnerability and masculinity and religion, how do you connect those together in that environment?
I mean, growing up, it was faith, family football, or faith, family sports.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad's from Wisconsin. He loved Vince Lombardi. That was Lombardi's thing.
Yeah.
God, family, the Green Bay Packers. And we kind of lived like that growing up. And it was a good structure for our lives. Southwest Ohio, big Irish Catholic family, loved sports. And it worked well, and it served me well, from the time I was born through, in some ways until today, but certainly through college and my 1 year in the NFL. I kind of knew there was more. I mean, I wasn't totally sheltered, and I'm the sixth of seven in my family, so they have I experienced a lot of life through their experience.
Yeah.
And it felt, I quit after 1 year. So in some ways it kind of felt like a betrayal of those values. I knew I'd be criticized as soft. And so that was something I had to confront. Football's great and I love football, but, my three pillars of life, today aren't God, family, and football.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like, cutting off a part of myself, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then, figuring out who I am. I think my challenge the last 7 years is a little bit different than what I've heard other guys say. They're trying to, reconcile their relationship with the game, really around negative things with the game.
Yeah.
And mine is more, I cut myself off so dramatically. 1 year, I really wanted nothing to do with football, and I was working a lot with former players who were struggling, so maybe even became cynical. And it would be easy for me to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there's a lot of great things I learned through the game, and it's fun to be around guys and share memories and talk about friends and plays. And I'm working on letting myself enjoy and appreciate who I was from, until 24.
Yeah. Did you see that smile he had on his face there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For our audience, and I know your story, but it's pretty unique. Can you just touch on a couple of the details, decision making, and what led you to that decision that shocked a lot of people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to be brief, but I do want to take it back. My dad played college football at Miami of Ohio, and he had all of his 6 boys wait until high school to play. And I'd beg him every year, like, let me play. All my friends are playing, please. He said, no, it can wait. And so I started in 9th grade, and I knew within 5 minutes, like, I love this. I'm going to do it. I want to play in college.
There was a passion.
Oh, like,
Yeah.
It was like heaven.
Uh-huh.
And, I being the 6th of 7 and living in a neighborhood full of athletes, like, and football players would always talk about how tough they were. And I played soccer, and so I was called like a grass fairy and things.
Oh.
My backyard games with my brothers and the older neighborhood kids were way more intense than the 9th grade football I started playing. So I was showing these kids up. But I was still small. People would laugh at me when when I say I wanted to play college football. I entered high school at 5'5", 150. So that was a pipe dream at that time to play college. Grew and worked on it and focused. I played 4 sports in high school until my junior year, and then I really focused on football and track. And so went from being, there's no way you can play college football to getting a scholarship to Wisconsin. My dad grew up in Madison, so it was big for our family, like kind of a homecoming. I know he was really proud that I was really our only football player. I'm like 2 or 3 inches taller than all my brothers, that I'm going back to Madison and going to play for the Badgers. There was still that question of, can this little kid, this slow white running back, like, play Big Ten football? And it went from a question of can you and personal doubts and certainly doubts from the outside to I was a freshman All-American and Big Ten Freshman of the Year right away. So became singularly focused. Like this is like everything is focused on football. And until that, through my freshman year, it was such a storybook. We won our high school's first state championship. I got the scholarship to the school I wanted to go to, and I was an All-American as a freshman. Then I had 3 surgeries right after my freshman year. So all those doubts came back. Will I ever play again? Can I reach the same level? Is that dream of the NFL now over? And it was the first time, I think, since 9th grade that I stepped back and had perspective of, the toll of football, the fact that it had dominated my life. I had other interests that I probably didn't pursue as much. I was so singularly focused that I was out for about a year and a half. And I'm grateful for that perspective. I don't know if I'd have developed in other ways at 18 or 19 had I just had 3 great years or 4 great years and then went to the league. But came back and got back to that level, was an All-American again, wound up staying for 5 years, was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, and wound up being drafted in the 3rd round by the 49ers. During college, the physical toll was, I played hard. I probably played too hard. Trained hard, played through injuries that in hindsight I wouldn't have played through. So I knew the physical toll. And there was this growing public concern about brain injury. I think I was willfully ignorant to it. We had our head coach leave my junior year, and I thought I could get drafted. I might explore leaving, and that was around the same time that Junior Seau took his life. So that caused me, I had a brain injury in 8th grade, another in 10th. Went both ways at a small Catholic high school, 4-year starter at Wisconsin. Lots of times, dizzy on fitting a block, woozy after making a tackle. I think when Junior did that, that was the first time that it went from, there's this issue that I don't really understand. The first case of CTE was Mike Webster, who played at Wisconsin. No one talks about it at Wisconsin. The story is, Webster was a steroid user and drinker, and that's why it happened. So when that happened with Junior, that was the first time I remember thinking, this brain stuff might be serious. But then I went back to focusing on my senior year. I had things I wanted to accomplish. We had a great team. And I really just put the blinders on. Had a good senior year, was drafted in the 3rd round into a great situation in San Francisco. And during that training camp, got a concussion. And that again was okay, let me just figure out what might happen to me if I met my goals of playing for a decade plus. And Hall of Fame was the dream. So I just started to look into it. I didn't know what CTE meant. Google search the acronym, find out what it means. And it kind of gathered steam throughout that year, looking into the information more, began to read some scientific articles, began to reach out to people doing the research. And what I'd learned in 6 months really was that it wasn't just Junior Seau and Mike Webster and guys that played for a long time and had a lot of injury. And there's a lot of names that people have never heard of. And so I learned that it was probably a bigger problem than I let myself realize. And it also made me reflect on my history, a brain injury in 8th grade that took me to the hospital, another in 10th grade that was significant. And then, I learned that once you compromise your blood-brain barrier, it's easier to get concussed. So maybe that's why I get a little woozy easier than other guys. So it was a torturous decision. My rookie season was looking into all this stuff. And then I was starting and playing well. I was named to the Pro Bowl as an alternate as a rookie. I was in a great situation in San Francisco. I mean, I could have taken over for Patrick Willis or Navarro Bowman in a year or two. Vic Fangio is one of the best defensive minds ever. The system was perfect for me. I realized, like, maybe I could, if I continue this production, make the Hall of Fame. But I couldn't justify going down that route with my history and what I'd learned with brain injuries. So it went from thinking a decade plus Hall of Fame to maybe play out my first, get to a second deal or play 3 years so I'm vested. But I just decided that's not, I don't want to have one foot out the door. So it was a pretty torturous couple of months after the season. I would inform the 49ers that in March of 2015 that I think I'm going to walk away from the game. And I was 20. I just turned 24. I knew the public conversation was white hot around, the game of football and brain injury. I thought I'd be a story for a day, and then, within a few months,
disappear,
be in grad school or be working a job. And that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
I was on Face the Nation 6 days after I told the 49ers I was quitting. CBS this morning the next week. And I didn't really want to be like a flag bearer for a cause. To me, this was a practical decision with my history, with my goals, with my family situation. I just, and I had a good experience in the game of football. I wasn't jaded. I didn't think I was lied to, or it was just health. But that it kind of did happen that I was, a reluctant spokesman for a cause that really wasn't my fight. The reason I decided to do interviews and to speak out was really for former players that I think got taken advantage of, and potentially to make the game better and safer for people that were yet to play. I don't think you need to play when you're 5. I don't think you need to hit 3 times a week when you're in high school and college. And I thought I could be a part, maybe I was naive, of changing the game for the better and protecting and helping out former players in need. I don't know how much of a difference I made, but that was why I decided to do advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, and I've read, obviously I'm not a football player, but, it's like 1,400, 1,500 hits a year that the body, right? We're not just talking concussed, but we're talking the body itself.
Yeah. No, and it was interesting when I quit, the reaction. I think so few guys play in the NFL.
Yeah.
Most of the reaction came from fans, from media types. And they're mostly incredulous. You're an up-and-coming player. How could you leave that much money? How could you stop doing something you dedicated your life to? Within the game, and there's certainly many guys disagreed, but at least they kind of got it. Like, yeah, it can be brutal. Mm-hmm. And, as I was looking into all of this stuff, the NFL concussion settlement lawsuit was going on. So, 4,000 players who were going through it. So, they were like, yeah, of course, like I'm dealing with this. So it, there's a lot to it.
Yeah. I am curious, and, as you use the word treacherous, this decision that you had to make for yourself, right? And then all of a sudden we throw in the social media and what you're hearing or what you're reading, what you're seeing. I'm curious, how was that for you in those moments as you're taking that in, as you're, when we talk about the stigma of mental health, and, what was that like for you? It had to have been difficult, to make the decision, but then all of a sudden the fallout that's coming your way.
Yeah, it was miserable. Like I wanted to disappear. I was never big on social media, but the person whose handle is just Chris Borland is like this middle-aged software engineer in Virginia. and I'm Chris Borland _. So this poor guy, and you fucking pussy, that type of stuff. And we talk. I told him, Chris, I'm sorry you went through that, but I am pretty, as focused as we were on sports growing up. My dad echoed something that Bill Russell said, is that it's always something you do, not something you are. Mm-hmm. And I think I had a good sense of self outside of being a football player. So as a player entering every stadium, everybody calls you every name. You play well, you still get criticism. You play poorly. So I was used to getting beat up. This was a different level. But my approach to it was just, I wasn't on social media much, and I didn't engage with, the average fan who knows nothing about the experience of playing or the science of injury from guys who've played.
Yeah.
The more challenging position I found myself in, this was like a complex thing that I don't think I was prepared for. It was the politics of how the science was funded. I was going to the concussion conferences and, meeting with people that were, they were funded by the NFL or the NCAA or Department of Defense. And I was in over my head. I don't think anybody can navigate that well, let alone a 24-year-old that was a history major. But I did the best I could. And one thing that was important to me, and one thing that maybe hasn't come across great in media coverage of it, was like I only ever did any advocacy to try to help raise awareness, to make changes with the game, and to help former players. It's a good story, it gets a lot of clicks to say, you're pro or anti-football, and that's just not the case. There's a lot of nuance. So I try to do things that were constructive. A lot of people approached me with the cure, the end-all, or the silver bullet for this issue, and we're trying to sell something or use my story to promote their product or program or study. I went back to Madison and met with a researcher named Richie Davidson. Mm-hmm. And Richie's a world-renowned neuroscientist, famous for proving that meditation changes your brain physiologically. And he was the first person that didn't try to sell me anything. And he said, if you have a pathology, meditation's probably not going to change that, but it'll give you a better relationship with it. And it was so refreshing to hear that. So I teamed up with Richie, and we ran a pilot program in 2017 with 17 former NFL players, teaching mindfulness and meditation. Which was my role was to recruit players to it, to try to get funding for it, and then to tailor the program to the cohort, so to speak. But like what that wound up looking like is I'm meeting with like middle-aged former NFL guys from rural Wisconsin, and like I've got to talk to them about loving compassion and meditation. So it was just, it was more of a case of guys, just trust me. There's science behind this. It works. And it was a hit. We ran an 8-week program in 2017. The teacher that ran our program then got hired as the nation's first director of meditation training. So he works with an athletic department. So he works with the University of Wisconsin, teaching coaches and athletes the basics of mindfulness for performance and well-being. And if nothing else came of the stress I went through after quitting, like Chad and his role, that pilot, the work he's doing with active athletes, I'm happy with that. Because, when I was in college, dealing with the injuries, dealing with pressure of being a good player, my only coping mechanism was to get fucked up, 2 or 3 times during the season, and certainly, a few times in the off season. I think a lot of guys were like that. Just go to the bars and get shit faced, and I didn't really have the tools to deal with the stress of being, like a marquee player.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be a big time player.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, it's unbelievably mature decision, at 24 years old to be able to have that sense. But over 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Any bit of regret, just what would you do differently, if anything? And where's your reflection from that decision kind of landed you?
Yeah. No regrets today. So, more research has come out, and I'm not excited about, but I think that's confirmed or reassured my decision. There were times when I'd, see a guy who I knew I was better than sign an $80 million deal, and maybe I could have stuck it out a little longer. But one of the, I've just, and unintentionally, but just that decision and the work I've done since has exposed me to some incredible things. And the type of things that I hope help other people. And so no regrets. It hasn't been easy, navigating something that at times I'd feel like I never really had someone to talk to. Like other guys have walked away before they had to. And other guys have been spoken out, but I've really kind of felt like an N of one. And I've found a few people that I feel like I can really relate to and confide in. And those relationships are invaluable to me. So it's still a fluid situation. I thought for years, I thought every next thing I committed to was going to be the last thing I did in the space. And that's not true. One of the former players that's become like a close friend and mentor, his name's Pat Toomey. Incredible person. He played 10 years in the 70s, wrote a couple books while he was playing, and is just like a larger-than-life figure. And I asked Pat a couple years ago, as I kept committing to things where I thought it'd be my last, and it kept going. He still writes about football, and he's so interesting and involved in so many things. I asked him, why do you keep, you're 74 right now. You know all of these interesting people from, writers to researchers. Pat's just an incredible figure. Why do you, who cares? When you played 40 years ago, why do you still write about it? And he said, it doesn't matter if you think you're through with football. Football's never through with you. And to me, that's true. And we opened up with me talking about how do I continue, or how do I appreciate what football did for me, and it was real, and how it formed me. I don't want to cut that part of myself off. I want to find a way to incorporate it into my life in a healthy way. So don't regret the decision. And it's great to be a part of things like APN, the Center for Healthy Minds in Madison, doing some things still with the athletic department with Chad's role as their meditation teacher. Just to leave something better than you found it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's like the relationship with ball, right? And being able to, and I think owning our testimony, the vulnerability that we talk about, that you touched upon, earlier, but being able to recognize that this is part of your testimony, and being able to embrace and being able to, find the good in it too, even though the outcome may not have been, and your story, as you were talking about, this short little guy, stigma, when you look at that, you got a lot coming across you. No, you're not the perfect guy. You're not the right size. You're not the right height. But yet you overcame. That all of that's part of who you are.
Yeah, I never felt small on the field. And then I would see a picture of me and my teammates after the game, like, oh, I am 4 inches shorter. Than and
that's
so,
kind of like me sitting between you two.
So yeah, and that was, and that's a type. Jim Leonard is a hero of mine when I was coming up, and Jim, you think I'm small and relatively unathletic. Jim looks like a water boy, and he was a 10-year guy. So I always had that chip on my shoulder, and I went harder against guys that were prototypical. I'm thinking of one guy right now, the type of guy who's huge, jacked, warms up with his shirt rolled up so he somehow has abs even though he's 270. And I just remember I can't wait to light this motherfucker up. And he was this pretty boy, this fake tough guy.
Is that the warrior mentality?
There's the ball player.
He's coming out now.
I always got that ever since I played really hard and was really quiet off, the field court, whatever. And people think like, how are you that guy, and then that guy? And I think a lot of the fiercest warriors are really gentle off the field, like Troy Polamalu, Chris Spielman, Mike Tyson. Like film doesn't lie, and like it was fun to like flip the switch and probably channel some of these things that maybe some insecurity. Like, am I really like an All-American? I don't feel like
you said that a couple times.
Being like small. And slow. Like I don't even really know. I don't even really know how I was good. And so and there was always that fear. And I've heard Howie Long say this before. Like he never thought he was a good player, and that's what made him a good player. Like I always thought I had to get it done. I never thought I had arrived. And I think that's great for football success.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about. I don't know if I can say this but we talked about this in group earlier. And even today, I have a hard time celebrating wins. Like it's not enough. Like, partnering with Richie Davidson to run a first of its kind study that has been grown into a program that reaches hundreds of athletes and more people. That's a good thing. And at times I thought, it's just a pilot program and it's mindfulness. Like I can do more. I should do more.
Yeah.
So that's still an area of growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's common in football players and competitive athletes, like always waiting for the next shoe to drop and just having a little conservative, blanket over all good situations because you don't want to get too high or low and staying even keeled. Even though in real life some of that stuff should be celebrated,
Yeah. No, and you hear it about like coaches that, like Nick Saban wins a national championship and then it's like, I'm going to watch film and recruit the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm starting to do a little bit better job of like being happy about success and letting myself take credit for it. Not in a boastful way, but one of the ethics of football, I think, is self-sacrifice, and religion too. Like Catholicism is based on martyrdom. So, like, rather than be humble to the point of being self-effacing, like step into who you are and share it. And I still struggle with that, but it's I'm aware of it, and it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious. You had mentioned, you got a late start, in your career in Ball High School, and you, as you were talking, even you had this number 10 years. This is what I'm going to do. What was the plan after that? What were you wanting? I mean, was there a plan after that? It sounds like that. There was a settling in you, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a question they'll ask in NFL draft prep when you interview with teams. What do you want to do after football?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer and the truth was, I want to play as long as I possibly can and then get into coaching. So I was obsessed with football. I probably didn't heed my dad's advice of it's something you do, not something you are. I think I let myself be obsessed with it, and which I think is fine. It was my passion, and I loved it. I loved watching film, training, playing. The nature of my decision and the work I did and advocacy after, like I cut off that part of myself, and I, allowed it to be more black and white at times than it really was. NFL bad, football causes brain damage. There's this, I want nothing to do with it. My kids won't play. Bury that football player and create an entirely new person, which isn't possible or healthy. And my journey has been iterative since the decision to quit. when I knew that, okay, well, you're not going to, the nature of your decision, the work you do, you're not going to coach probably, or maybe you'd coach high school. I thought, okay, well, I'll go to law school. 3 of my brothers are attorneys. But I actually let myself kind of follow this unique path. So advocacy for, full-time for a year. I then worked at the Carter Center as an intern in mental health, but learned a lot. Meet with Richie and get deep into mindfulness and run this pilot program. I got certified as a meditation teacher through this program at Google that I've taught for years. Like a kind of a 180, but if you look back, it makes sense. It's kind of this iterative path. And then I've done some work in the media. So if you'd asked me if I'm back in that combine prep interview, I can't imagine saying, well, I'm going to teach some mindfulness and produce documentaries but it's been a joy, and I've let myself, I think that's some of that development that I didn't let myself explore while I was singularly focused on football, that I'm enjoying letting myself see and explore. A lot of imposter syndrome comes with that. But, I think that's something I had with football too. Yeah. Am I really this guy? Am I really doing this thing? But,
yeah. You said something about, the combine prep, and this was a question that was asked of you, right? Is that the only time that it's asked? Or is it asked, and I know you were there for a year, and maybe you can, throughout your career, was it asked, was there a strategic plan of what that exit plan might look like? Is there anything as far as, I know we said coping tools, football was our coping tool, but throughout that time, whether it's a year or whether it's more than 10, is there a strategic plan for you to exit and what that may look like? Because average age is what?
When you leave
the league, less than 30?
Yeah, 26, 27.
26, 27. And so you've put in not just the couple years while you're in the league, but college and high school, and some who start at 5, 6. You're looking at 15 plus years dedicated to the passion, to your love. And then we're asked this question during combine prep, what's there to help support or provide a bridge for when you're done? Or is there?
There's some programs, and the NFL has tried to do some things. Whether it's working is probably still an unknown. I see it where team by team kind of handles this situation and devotes more time and resources to it than others. But, it's not a priority by any means. I've been through a couple of organizations where they try, but, when you're in a building, it's there to work, and you're there to, win games and improve the program. So there's some nice programs out there, but whether it's making a difference or not, no, I really don't see it.
Yeah.
And I think from the player's perspective, there's a mentality of like burn the ships. And plan A is plan A, and if there's a plan B, you're not focused on plan A.
There's distraction with plan B.
Yeah, and there is some truth in that. I think guys that are fully committed maybe have more success, but like Anthony said, if you're done with football at 26, 27, you have 50 more years to live. And I think you hear a lot coming up, this won't last forever. But there's very little how. Like you get the what, like, I need a second career, but like, how do I work on that, high school, college, pro? Like what steps should I take? And it seems like universities and the NFL are starting to do a better job of that. But it was pretty much football, and then I'll figure out what I want to do when I'm done with football.
Yeah.
So through your time outside of football, 7 or so years, and I don't think it's a clean-cut answer, but what solutions have you found? And what do you think, what changes can be implemented to maybe drive some better results?
Yeah, when it comes to player health outcomes, I think one thing I learned quickly is that what's going to be the best for players is actually going to be outside the lines. If I can take off like mental health advocate hat and put on linebacker hat, I think it's unfair to throw a flag on a hit, like a regular football hit, and that doesn't address, the repetitive subconcussive injury. I think that's the NFL trying to make the mass public think they're doing better by players. I actually think it's unfair to players. I think you're passing the buck to them. I think a few things would dramatically improve the outcomes for players. I've done some work with the Concussion Legacy Foundation about flag until 14. If CTE is a disease that's related to your dose, the more cigarettes you smoke, the more likely you are to get lung cancer. The more you hit your head, the more likely you are to get CTE. Just wait to play tackle until high school. It makes no sense that high schoolers and college players hit more often than professional players. So if you start, in ninth grade, one contact practice a week at the most, same in college. 95% of people that play football don't play beyond high school. So hugely improves the outcomes for that group. And the guys that do go on to play college and pro, thousands of less hits between 5 and 13 or 14, if you think about the big picture. And these are all simple sounding, wait to play, hit less. There's so many obstacles to making that a reality. A third thing outside the lines, I think, is college athletes getting their fare and having better health insurance. Mm-hmm. I think if you make it to the NFL, by that time you've already probably incurred a lot of damage, and you really don't make it until you get to that second contract. So for me, if I go through the perspective of a talented young athlete, start in ninth grade, hit less, get the scholarship, make some money and have health insurance, and then, it may disincentivize you to play until the wheels fall off because you have that security. And if you want to play forever and make the Hall of Fame, that's great, but you don't have to. And I played with guys that, were star players at programs that made a lot of money, and they got to play for that second contract to set their family up. I think if they were taken care of in college, maybe they wouldn't play as long in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very proactive. You went all the way back to, again, Pee Wee ball, being proactive through the coaching, being proactive in how we practice and what we do, being proactive, moving through.
Well, and fans,
That's a whole nother one, right?
From their perspective, the product would hardly change. And I think a lot of people are just, their knee jerk is to be against changes like that. But I promise you'd still get together on Saturdays and Sundays and watch your team play and not even realize that the guys are in a much better situation.
Yeah.
I think those are some awesome solutions that are still very complex. I actually have, as I have young kids and I go through the decision process and get asked the question, are you going to allow your kids to play football? And I'm a hard yes. But you're saying make it a yes, but be a smart yes, maybe an informed, different yes. I've spoken about this with other football players, and kind of my belief is because I started tackle at a really young age, at third grade. Do you believe, or is there any merit to children starting full pads early gives them better technique, keeping their head up and learning the game without the major consequences? Because if someone starts high school football and you have a 280-pound guy coming down the line and he's never put on helmet and shoulder pads, he doesn't know how to brace for that hit or doesn't know what body position to put himself into to be able to properly absorb that hit or give a hit. So I have a little bit different of a stance on that, on teach them early, give them really good fundamentals early, and make the game about fundamentals and having fun and not necessarily winning every game and sacrificing for wins, but to give them a great foundation to have a healthy, long football career as long as they wanted to.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I think that instruction could come in 8th grade, 9th grade. And I also think football is a game that requires physical strength and explosiveness. There was a study at Virginia Tech about the G-force that young athletes face, and it's similar to college football players because they don't have strong necks. So it's not necessarily the hit, but when you land and get the whiplash. So I get your point. And as someone that started in 9th grade, my dad played college linebacker. I probably hurt my shoulders because I was lunging at tackles and arm tackling. And he was adamant about see what you hit, keep your head up, chop your feet when you're around a pile. But I didn't really know how to tackle, even until I got to Wisconsin. So that was more a byproduct of I played running back in high school. But I see what you're saying. I just think that instruction could take place later because there is, it's just a matter of physics. If every year, 300 to 500 hits at a certain G-force to the undeveloped brain, like, I don't know, to me, and there's certainly, millions of people that played starting when they were 5 and are totally healthy and happy. But to me, that's not worth taking on that risk when you could just learn it later and have started to lift weights so that your neck's protected, and you're not, this is like maybe a flippant thing to say, but like, and as a kid that didn't play youth football, it just seems like whoever hits puberty first runs around everybody or runs everybody over. This is like getting off topic, but I think sports specialization is a huge problem.
Yep.
And I played 4 sports in high school. I played tennis, in high school, and I loved it. And I think I developed a lot of athleticism playing soccer, basketball, baseball, tennis. And I see kids today that, have their speed coach, their position coach, and play one sport year round. I think that's bad for burnout. I think it's probably bad for repetitive use injuries with your body. And it kind of takes the joy out of playing. I used to like every season was a new sport. But that's
we could have a whole show on that.
Show.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I'm also curious, or I wonder a little bit, because as you both were talking, right, there's an emphasis on the physical training, the physical development, the physical, whether it's the tackles, But I wonder, as we look at, mental health, that is there a component that could also be proactive in being able, as a young child at the age of 8, you were talking growing up, you're, having those dizzy spells. Were you able to advocate, if this child is able to advocate, are we having those discussions, whether it's at the coach level, whether it's at the team level, whether it's at the family level, being able to provide safe space to allow them to have a voice that, I'm seeing stars, and be able to support that even.
I think it would depend a lot on what league you're in and what area of the country you're in. You probably know, I play with guys who people were betting on their Pop Warner games. So
like real money?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My gosh.
So there's like this gulf between best practices and reality that like we can pretend, but like there's communities that, self-advocacy as a kid is not happening. So it doesn't really answer the question, but
I think it does, right? Because that's what we're looking at, breaking that stigma. And
it's like, I think what Chris is saying, it's tough to put the onus on the kids. Even as an adult NFL player. Now there's baseline tests, but if you're like, hey, just let me know when your headache goes away and then you're cleared to play, or tell me when symptoms subside and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, well, my job's online, so I guess I'm good to go. Yeah. So there needs to be like a safe fail here or some kind of boundary that, protects the player from having to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one with the head because, if you're 9, 10, like, wait, am I a little dizzy? Is this a concussion? Like, you don't really, and no one else sees it, and you don't look different. One of the things, and the Concussion Legacy Foundation did this, I think it's a good idea, is the Team Up, Speak Up program. So it, go to teams and tell players, keep an eye out for the guy next to you. And if he doesn't look right, let somebody know. Because I would get concussed and shake it off and keep playing. But maybe, and this is again the gulf between best practices and reality, because your teammate might be thought of as a snitch if he. But I think that's good because we'll take care of each other better than we'll take care of ourselves.
Yeah, the guy that's behind you, the second string guys, be like, "Hey, he's got a concussion. He's out. Let me get my shot."
That's true. It's a weedy problem, or entangled problems here.
Yeah. Well, it is, because your language that you just used when we looked at that 8-year-old, my job's on the line. That's the same mentality, right, that carries all the way to you're 24, 25, 26, and it's to remain silent because why? My job's on the line. And that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of anxiety. I mean, it's a lot that your body is holding inside because we can't advocate and be verbal.
It only intensifies as time goes on.
Bingo.
I mean, there's bigger consequences.
Yeah,
to sitting out.
And it starts young. I mean, I was my dad's biggest son, so people in the community would be like, "Oh, you finally got a football player, Jeff." And people would ask me when I'm going out for football growing up, and there's Dayton, Ohio, loves football, and so you're not just looking out for yourself. There is you're a part of a culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No easy solution, huh?
No easy solution.
Yeah. Well, I will say I honor your story, and I honor you being open and honest about your journey. And if there was anything, as we come to an end here, if there was anything that you would want to share to those who might be watching, what would that be, and where you're at today?
I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. There can be serious consequences, but there's a lot of practical things to improve our mental health that are available. So need not despair.
Yeah, good.
No, incredible story. I just want to thank you as a peer, former football player, and advocacy that you're doing for the rest of us, and also as a father of boys that will probably play football in the future. I think the game is in a lot better hands, like you said, and the future is bright.
Good. Yeah. And I think if I was just to kind of sum this all up, right, it is solidarity, that if we're feeling isolated, we're feeling alone, and we may not have that family support, there are others out there, right? And being able to advocate and being able to break the silence, and that's what we're doing here. So I want to thank both of you guys.
Thank you, and thanks to APN for creating the opportunity for players to come together.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So as we come to an end, if you have any questions, email us at pod@apn.com. To see more of this podcast or others, go to apn.com/podcasts. Thank you.